Hello, and welcome back to another episode of Dormroom Diplomacy. I am your host today, Matthew Nelson, and I am joined, as usual, with the lovely co-host, Mr. Jack Arnold.
How's it going?
It's going pretty well.
Love that.
Oh, Lord, let's not do that again.
I love that. Yeah. Little auditory warning.
Yeah, headphone users beware.
Something like that.
But today, I think we have a cool topic for you guys. I think that it's something that I am very interested in. Have some opinions on, but am definitely interested in it nonetheless.
Naturally.
Can be controversial at times, depending on who you are and what you think. But, without further ado, we'll get into the topic, of course. And today we are going to talk about this idea of the new internet called Web 3.0. And of course, this topic requires just a slight amount of backstory to it. Because I've got a feeling that a lot of viewers may have heard this term thrown around as a buzzword. Web 3.0 this, Web 3.0 that. It's in Web 3.0 is involved in, this and that, whether it be cryptocurrencies, NFTs, so on and so forth. But Web 3.0 is, in essence, the framework that runs these different items, these different things that use this buzzword. And essentially, it requires a little bit of backstory. And like I was saying, what we have to talk about first is, of course, why is it called Web 3.0? Well, it kind of makes sense that there was a Web 1.0 and a Web 2.0. And it would also kind of, you could, if you're an intelligent type, you glean the, the information that we are probably in the state of Web 2.0 at this current moment. And so we're just going to talk about it a little bit. Web 1.0 essentially was, what the internet was like in the 90s. Essentially, basically just text-based websites with, very little interactability, very little, visual appeal, very little, hyperlinkability between websites into a greater network. It was more just this, very small, essentially unit of websites that existed on a very small number of servers where only, large businesses that had the money to either, pay developers to build websites or extremely, tech-savvy individuals who had the capabilities and the skills to program their own websites could essentially participate in the creation of this Web 1.0. And that's the very simplistic way to look at it. It's basically internet, pre-2000 is in essence what it was, if you want to put a sort of relatively close date on it. Yeah. And what happened was, post-2000-ish era, we started to get a couple of very important, tools that developers can use to make these websites and make this Internet of Things better optimized for the end user like you and me. And while we may be a bit more tech savvy, or you may be a bit more tech savvy than us, this is for, everyone on the internet to take advantage of and to use the full of its abilities. And basically what ended up happening is things like JavaScript and, other web-based graphical user interface type programs were made available to developers, to big companies, and to individuals like you and me to essentially go out and either build their own websites or participate in this, better environment where it's just better interactivity with the internet. So you're talking about, these are like, in essence, JavaScript gives the ability to make those really sexy animations on Apple's website, or, the great, like, I don't know how to explain it, but the, scrolling screened websites where as you're scrolling down the site, you see pictures change in this like really, really
Oh,
I
they're
don't
so
know,
great.
cool animated way. Like it just makes websites look better and it makes the internet, more advanced. And there's a lot more to it. That's more of the front end. That's kind of a way to, identify the front end. But in the back end, it just created this more connected internet and it basically put us into this more centralized model, which plays a lot into what Web 3.0 is not.
Mm-hmm.
So to talk a little bit about what Web 2.0 and this centralized concept is that you've got your Apples, you've got your Googles, you've got your Facebooks, you've got your whatever the hell you want. What is centralized about their, data? They're on big, massive data servers centralized together in like 6 locations around the world. Like Chicago is a big is a big internet exchange hub. I know that, Vancouver is also a big internet exchange hub. I'm sure there's a big internet exchange hub in Texas. And around the world, there's these big internet exchange hubs. And oftentimes these companies will put these centralized server hubs in these areas. And all of your data is stored on one of those hubs where it can be easily, accessed by everyone else on that network and everyone else near to that network. It's just this idea of getting large amounts of data together and storing it in one place. And what's important about that, of course, is, latency, your ability to connect to it, ease of access, ease of recording, ease of being able to go find that specific photo that you posted on Facebook in 1998, might be stored on a tape drive in the middle of Chicago. But the fact that Facebook knows exactly where it is, that's what's nice about this centralized method of storing data, which kind of changes us now into Web 3.0 and why it's a bit controversial.
Certainly. Yeah, I think one thing I want to just touch on a little bit is in terms of, the Web 1.0, Web 2.0, and subsequently Web 3.0 as well. It's just kind of, it's good to be aware, like, these aren't necessarily like concrete definitions,
No,
like
not at
terms, anything. It's more of an idea. It's hard to define these, and also that's why if you're even if you just go Google like what is Web 3.0 or
You'll get
trying to
hundreds of
figure
different
out
answers.
like everyone has different answers to these questions, and so I think of it more in just a kind of a evolution, a progression of the internet. Similar to what you said, we're in Web 1.0. It's mostly consumer based. You have a lot of these text only, just visual only websites, pages that you interact with, and you're just kind of consuming. Whereas Web 2.0, with the evolution of JavaScript, other code bases, and kind of the evolution of programming languages as well, as they kind of branch off, become more nuanced, and allow for more efficient application. It allows people to, instead of only consuming, then become the creator, and that kind of expands the internet into a whole new sphere that we're experiencing today, which is, like you mentioned, with a lot of these big organizations, it's very corporatized, and there's not a whole lot of individual autonomy because everything's pretty highly regulated and controlled by whichever organization owns the media service that you're operating on or a user of, let's say. And
that's what gets us the controversy.
Right, exactly. And we'll touch a lot on kind of what a lot of the negatives people view with this move into Web 3.0, but essentially just to give a little introduction, think of it just in the most basic of terms as, instead of having these large corporations, your Apples, your Facebooks, your Googles, you're taking, these services and creating new platforms, new software, media sharing services, whatever it may be. There's hundreds of applications, not just on, don't think of it just as internet-based like social media interaction, but really, all spheres of technology. But you're taking these corporations and essentially, disbanding the leadership hierarchy, the ownership structure, and making it so that it's something where it's owned autonomously and the value of the company is derived from the shareholders. and the opinions of the company, the direction of, and it's not even companies. They're what's going to be called DAOs, and so it's a decentralized autonomous organization.
Right.
And like I said, it derives its value from its shareholders, and by shareholders, it's going to be based upon a blockchain technology where, similarly to a cryptocurrency like Bitcoin, you have quote unquote shareholders, which are people who, have mined or have exchanged to hold Bitcoin, and that ownership, the holdings of that, give them a say in, like transactional, in terms of Bitcoin, it's a say in like transactional decisions and stuff like that. But if we're talking about these DAOs, these new organizations, it's going to be direction of the company, like actions that this organization takes.
Right.
Because depending on how much of a share you hold in the company, and don't think of it as a share, as in
a
terms
traditional
of,
holding stance.
Exactly. Yeah. It's a share of what has been. It's just using the blockchain technology to farm what will most often be data, and then that data is then converted into some token of ownership that you then use to, as a proof of concept that you are a shareholder in this particular entity.
Exactly. And to, express in a little bit more detail, like we said before, Web 1.0 to 2.0 to 3.0, you expressed it as an evolution, and it absolutely is an evolution of, the way that programming languages, like you said, have evolved, but also most importantly, the way that we have been able to advance our technological power and our compute power as it is. So the bandwidth that we're allowed to transfer between, one device to another and so on and so forth through this interconnected Internet of Things. And as we move forward, we talk about this idea that Web 3.0 is going to be backed upon, and that is what you call the blockchain. And to get into a little bit more about the blockchain and a little bit more about what Bitcoin itself is, or these coins, Bitcoin's generally used as the biggest example because it's probably the largest, Bitcoin and Ethereum probably the largest traded cryptocurrencies right now. And the reason they're used is because they're great ways to explain this very complex idea that is the blockchain. And essentially what the blockchain is it's, you use the word centralized versus decentralized. And decentralized is what Web 3.0 and the blockchain is based on, and centralized is what Web 2.0 in the past has been based upon. And we are not there yet. I'd like to preface that. We are not at Web 3.0 yet by any stretch of the imagination. Widespread adoption hasn't happened and won't happen for a while, but we're getting there. And essentially what this technology does is it holds what we call a decentralized register. Now, think of this register as an extremely long list of, for instance, in Bitcoin transactions. I have transacted to Jack a Bitcoin. That transaction goes on the decentralized register, and that register is distributed to all of these decentralized computers that are a part of the blockchain network. So the blockchain is a network of tons and tons and tons of computers that are essentially being utilized to hold this decentralized public register that anyone can go and see, that essentially shows that I transferred a Bitcoin to Jack. Jack is now the only sole owner of this Bitcoin under this exact serial ID, right? So Jack can be the only one that, it shows that I was the one that transferred it to him, and he is the only one that possesses it. And essentially, each time something new happens, they add a new block to the metaphorical chain that is the blockchain in this register. And that's how your data is essentially ID'd with, you are the only person that can ever have it. And it's essentially, that's how it's secure in a sense that there are, hundreds of thousands of replicate registers around the internet that essentially are exact copies of each other. So you can't really falsify a transaction on the blockchain. And this just goes with kind of. That's where we get into the, more technical controversy, because essentially hackers are smart, and like any type of technology, generally, people that want to exploit the technology are looking farther ahead than the developers. And this is just like anything. Like, how does a developer try to, protect against a security breach that they don't even know exists, right? Like, when you're a hacker, which is a terrible word, but it's the word we're going to use here, is trying to exploit a certain system or exploit a certain aspect of a program. There are hundreds of millions of lines of code that they could possibly find a single exploit for, and developers don't know the first. It's very difficult. Like, you can security proof as much as you want, but it's very difficult to find the exact spot where someone's going to try and exploit a program. And that's where we have problems. So essentially, the idea behind this blockchain technology is that it's supposed to be this idea that there's a register that is decentralized among multiple different computers. And it's supposed to be that whenever a transaction or an event, we'll call it an event because it can be, anything from, a transaction of a Bitcoin to, the essentially authentication that a certain NFT exists. Like, all of these things can be recorded on the blockchain, and it's a way of storing and transferring that publicly so that there isn't any fraud. I say that with air quotes. But oftentimes this is where it devolves.
You're absolutely right. The blockchain technology allows for a much more robust fraud protection system. That being said, it's not perfect. Things are going to still slip through. You can still falsify accounts. Typically, you cannot, like, everything that's, going to be codified into the blockchain is, going to be there. And it's non-removable, and it's, not something you can really tamper with either. That being said, there's plenty of exploitation, to be done through falsifying accounts and also manipulating how these exchanges of information take place. And exactly. It's a whole nother story getting into poking holes through the foundational technology itself. But I do want to make it clear that as compared to many like centralized authorities, especially in the financial services industry, there's such a lower amount of fraudulent activity, and it is so much harder to falsify any of these records or counterfeit any of these exchanges than it would be in a centralized network. And so I think that it's important to know that, because while at this point in time, blockchain technology really is only being used in kind of both the sectors of financial services with cryptocurrencies, as well as NFTs and the exchange of digital assets. I think both are valuable technologies. I think cryptocurrency is here to stay as a means of exchange. I don't think NFTs in their current application have much of a lifespan like we've seen them. I mean, for anyone who, like, during 2020, kind of the height of the crypto
if you
bull
made
market.
Money, I'm not gonna say anything else.
I mean, money is money, but if you weren't existing solely within that bubble, then you're certainly hurting, because it's just not something. And I don't know how people didn't see this before, but we don't need to go into the our NFT's good, our NFT's bad.
Right.
I think that the underlying technology there's certainly potential. And honestly, for me, I think more in, the world of like collectibles and even, creating like video games around them and certain stuff that. Not just, simply an image, but, or, some of the utility-based NFTs where they allow access to, there's real-world tangible benefits to owning one of those, whether it be, some VIP invites or something, or access to certain events, like different, utilities that are tied to these NFTs.
Right.
Sure, there's some tangible value there. I could see potential with that. But when it comes to using the blockchain technology, I think a lot of people get confused because, what you were saying is absolutely right. Like, it's all of the information is going to be there stored on thousands of computers, and that's why it's such a robust, secure system. But I think where a lot of people, there's a disconnect is, people don't understand how one becomes involved with that, or how, like, if
exactly.
If I'm just sitting at home on my computer and I'm hearing all these people, all these buzzwords, blockchain, crypto, Web 3.0, flying around, it's like, oh, well, what is this? And what does this mean for me? And I think a lot of people just kind of get caught up in
for sure
confused by what the application.
One thing that I want to do here real quick before I will explain that, though. One of the other things I want to talk about right before you get into that, but was there was one other use case that I saw that was really, really unique. One other, application for blockchain technology that I thought was really cool, and that is going to probably see widespread adaptation and adoption. And it's when it comes to tracking certain items across supply chains. When you can give a physical item, like, I don't know, a case of Red Bull or an iPhone or whatever it may be, a ID on the blockchain, and as it moves from warehouse to warehouse, manufacturing place to manufacturing place, as it moves across the world, it also moves across a decentralized blockchain that essentially allows these producers to track their products, know where they are, know exactly where they came from. And one of the cool things that they're trying to do with this is that if it saw widespread adoption, there's this thing in the US, at least, where but there's a bad PR rap on perhaps getting your magnesium for your new shiny iPhone unethically. And by unethically, I mean, some places don't perhaps use the greatest means of, extracting these rare earth metals or whatever resource it may be. There's a lot of controversy around this as well, about, is it safe? Is there child labor? Is it unethical? Whatever it may be, there's some bad working situations, and it's been a bigger, issue in the present day. Hey, we want to source our materials ethically if we're an ethical company. And one of the things that this blockchain technology could do is essentially register the factory that has this, or the mining company that's getting these rare earth metals, and put a tag on each of their lots of these metals, and essentially, hey, this came from here and here only, and that's it. And we know we can look all the way back in the chain, track it all the way back, and find exactly where this exact lot came from, and that pretty much eliminates this issue.
Yeah, I think it's a great example of another one of the valuable applications. And sorry, but I mean, this technology really can be applied so much more than we're seeing it today. It really isn't just, creating a financial registrar, or, documenting, ownership of a fungible token. Like, there's so
we're
many
making it
more
sound very
applications.
boring right now.
Right. Yeah. But, like, think about literally, like, everything you're using and interacting with can be, created and, I guess, entered into a blockchain. And in a second, I'm going to do just like a super basic level breakdown, just because I think it's valuable. Because I've talked to a lot of people about cryptocurrency and NFTs and Web 3.0 and blockchain technology. And there's always a very large disconnect where people understand what it kind of means, and they understand like cryptocurrency, and they understand like, a blockchain means, there's an individual owner, and that's proofed across, many computers, and it's, okay, that makes sense. And same thing with NFTs, like, okay, you own, this digital asset, and you're the sole owner of that because it says so on, every computer taking place within the network.
Right.
And I think that's pretty straightforward. But just to kind of dive a tiny bit deeper into like, okay, well, like, what the hell is actually a blockchain? Like, I think it's just important to kind of lay it out. And so
I think you have an analogy then.
A little bit. I mean, I wish I had a whiteboard back here, because explain, I've done a whiteboard explanation before, and it helps me.
It's easy to diagram this.
It helps me to explain it as well.
Yeah.
And so maybe my hands will help the visual listeners, but for audio listeners, you're in for an interesting ride. But I mean, think about it. Okay, it's a blockchain, right? And so what does that mean? It's a bunch of blocks chained together. It's like, oh, okay, that seems pretty straightforward, right?
And so, you'll call it in the register, essentially. It's the blocks chained together in this register.
And so what are these blocks? It's kind of like you said earlier, they're comprised of data. And, what is this data? And so what I want you to imagine is if I, want to become a member, let's say a member of the blockchain. That's not quite how it works, but, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to use my computer, and keep in mind, typically this takes a decent amount of computing power, which is why you see, all the, huge GPU farms that people purchase, and
thanks for the shortages,
and put in shipping containers, to mine, cryptocurrencies. But think about it like this. What blockchain is a proof of work system. And so what that means is in order to establish an entry in the blockchain registrar, you need to prove that you have done work. And by work, it's, computing. And so essentially, the analogy I've heard a lot of times is like, it gives you like problems to solve, and, your computer goes to work solving those problems. It's a good analogy, but it's not really true. Right. I don't look up blockchain.com and they give me a math problem, and then I need to solve it, and then if I do, I get a Bitcoin, and I'm like, yes! You
don't need a NASA level differential equations problem. That's not what.
Right. Yeah, and exactly. So essentially, what it is it's very, very like non-traditional equations is how is what I'll use to explain this. And so don't think of it as, an equation like where, it's just like a basic algebraic equation where you have to solve for X or something. Think about it where you need to provide inputs, and with the purpose of, acquiring a desired output. And so what that means is your computer is going to input a variable, and in what it's called is a hashing function. These blockchains, the actual underlying technology is so complicated, and frankly, I don't understand it super well either. But the programmers who have put all of these different blockchains together, and keep in mind, the blockchain is not just the blockchain. There's hundreds and hundreds of different blockchains. Ethereum is a blockchain. Bitcoin is a blockchain. Solana is a blockchain. Avalanche, Polygon.
They're separate.
So many, separate. And they're all separate, and they're all different too. And so, the big draw of Ethereum when it was created is it, cut down the gas fees from Bitcoin transactions on their blockchain. It also made it more efficient, many more transactions per second, and basically all of the blockchains attempt to, improve upon each other or integrate new functionalities that other blockchains don't necessarily have. And that's the draw of these new technologies. And so it's, it's nice that it's a competitive market, and the decentralized nature of the market is what makes it so competitive, which is only a benefit for the consumer, because, that's in a competitive market. Ideally, the best competitor wins, with, the most robust feature set. And so, but going back to, to our example, all of these blockchains are built on what are called hashing functions. And these hashing functions are basically like those equations I was talking about. What they want from you, basically your computer, essentially, is they have a desired output that they want, and it's the job of the computer to compute the string of variables necessary to receive that output. And so if you put, X in and it gives you B, then okay, great. But the thing is, putting XX in does not give you BB. Putting XX in could give you C. And so it's changing, your input, even by small amounts, drastically changes your output. And so that's why these start to take so much time, because, in the beginning of some of the first blockchains, and, Bitcoin's the most commonly known one, so we can use that as an example. It was extraordinarily simple equations just like that. But, years have gone by, and now it takes extraordinary amounts of time to compute these strings of variables that are inputted to, give your desired outputs. And once how it works basically is, I'll keep using the example of Bitcoin because it's the most well known, and it is kind of the first big one. But you have we'll say a Bitcoin, which is your proof of work. It's your reward. It's why people want to do this. And whoever comes up with the desired output, whoever gives the correct string of inputs that leads to the desired output, will then receive the Bitcoin. And in a different blockchain, it's a different, token of exchange or method of reward, but that's what you receive. And then you can then continue to do so. And that's what essentially Bitcoin mining is. And there's a really good analogy that is, makes this very simplistic. But if you take a classroom, right, and, it's a teacher and a class, and the teacher is a centralized organization, right? She has control over all of the grades. Everything goes through her. She doesn't like you, she can fail you, all of this. You don't necessarily have much of a say when it comes to her decisions. Now, let's say you give the power in the class of grading assignments to the students. And every student gets to look over your test, look at your answers, compare them to the correct answers, and they get to vote. And, the general consensus will then be your grade. Mm-hmm. And so it's kind of, and then it's like, oh, well, why would, they do that? Well, the students are rewarded for participating in this voting system by receiving the grade themselves. And then, obviously, that's what you're pursuing in school would be the grade.
Right.
And so if you translate it over to the blockchain, it's like, well, why would people want to, basically, quote unquote, check these other solutions and, input all of these variables to receive the desired outputs? And that's, still a simplistic way of thinking about it, but it's essentially how it works. Why would people want to do this? And it's because they're going to receive that proof of work, which can then be exchanged, depending on the blockchain, for real world tangible value.
Right. And essentially, I believe what it's essentially trying to do in essence is verify the, veracity of essentially all the other registers that exist. And it's of course, like you said, it's extraordinarily complicated. But that's just kind of a basic understanding. One of the things that, I want to talk about in a little bit more detail as well is the finance part of it. And after this, I want to get into a little bit about the future applications, because it's really cool, and it has to do hint with this real ID concept we talked about in the Twitter episode. Yeah. But what I want to talk about before that is the financial aspect, and so aptly named by our lovely, programmers, developers, blockchain enthusiasts, idealists. The name of essentially blockchain-based finance is, decentralized finance, right? But the acronym is DeFi. Did you know that? The acronym's supposed to be DeFi, which is hilarious. But essentially, the way it kind of works is what blockchain technology is in its end trying to do when it comes to these cryptocurrencies and these transactions is, let's take conventional stock market trading. If I want to go and buy a stock off of, some stock exchange, Jack, what do I do first?
Well, you're going to, create a brokerage account for yourself. And
exactly.
You can put in a bid for the company.
Exactly.
And it's going to be delayed because for non-professional brokers, you basically aren't going to make any money. And there's plenty of. We'll do a whole other episode on that for all you Robinhood stans.
Exactly.
But yeah, no, you can put a bid in to, purchase a share of a company at its current market price, in which case they can then they will approve that because you're paying them for ownership in their company, which is the goal of a publicly traded company.
Right. But the important part about what you're saying is the brokerage part. And the second important part about it is the stock exchange. So what happens? I say I want, 10%, or I want not 10%. I want 10% of a share of Tesla, right? With Tesla shares being what, like $650 some dollars? It's higher than that. I don't know what it is right now. But whatever it is, I want 10% of a share. I give you $60. Let's say it's $600. I give you $60. I send that into a brokerage, whether it be like, I don't care who it is, Robinhood, TD Ameritrade. I don't know all the brokerage things out there, but there's a lot. You give it to them, and then they basically call for that and on the stock exchange, and then you exchange your currency for a percentage of the company, or a percentage of the company, whatever it may be. And now you're the holder of that company, essentially through an identifier on the internet. There's lots of different ways. Also, like, paper trails. There's ways to show in conventional that you own this, piece of this, this piece of this company. Now, this is where it changes for crypto, and this is where it changes for blockchain-based, things. When I go buy it conventionally, I have a contract, right? A written out contract that requires, human authentication. I need to go put my signature or e-signature nowadays onto this contract, that long contract that you don't want to read, that basically states all the terms and conditions that you have to abide by through the brokerage account and through the stock exchange. And then I'm paying this amount for this exchange, at this exchange rate for this, company at this percent, right? That's what you're doing. And you have a contract, and that contract exists. And when you sell it, you sign a new contract, you've sold it, you get the currency back in US dollars or whatever the hell it may be. Now, the way the blockchain works is based on this concept of smart contracts. And what essentially it is it's proposed to be either partially or in the long run fully executed and enforced without any human interaction, and automated, essentially, where the main objective is essentially this concept of automated escrow. So when you're waiting, like you said, to buy the stock, your money sits in escrow with the brokerage, and whenever the purchase or transaction and the contract gets signed and it goes through, you are then transferred over to percentage in a company. What the key feature of this is that there doesn't need to be that third party. There doesn't need to be that middleman. There doesn't need to be that brokerage account.
Right.
You want this, percentage of a Bitcoin. It happens instantly with a smart contract. And basically what happens is once you click buy on your iPhone, you are essentially signing that smart contract, and that smart contract is validated by blockchain technologies that we've been talking about this whole time, that allows it to be essentially, universally validated across all of these different computers. And it essentially allows you to instantly do these transfers without the middleman involved. And obviously that gets rid of a lot of business models, and it basically gets rid of all of, Robinhood's, your TD Ameritrades, your whatever it may be. But that's the concept. Yeah. And this doesn't just go for DeFi. This doesn't just go for finances. This is kind of an idea that works when it comes with any type of transaction that we're talking about. And that's to put it in more layman's term.
Yeah, it's the whole idea of this decentralized nature. If it's DeFi for finance, or if it's these DAOs for decentralizing these corporations. I think the question that people are going to ask is, why do we need that? And so, within the context of finance, for example, like eliminating the middleman is only a positive for the individual broker, your everyday trader. How do you think these people make money? They're either taking a fractional percentage of your share, or they're front running your trades in order to quote unquote manipulate the market in a way that won't get their ass beat by the SEC. But it's important to just look at this as not just with finance, but in all of the for all the applications that this technology can have. It's the decentralization that's the most important part, and what we're gonna see first before anything else. Because in order for this quote unquote Web 3.0, like we said earlier, it's not There's no concrete definition for this. It's a pretty abstract concept. But the thesis of the concept is, decentralizing all of these things, cutting out the middleman, making it so, things aren't government regulated or aren't, corporately regulated. And so
which they will try to do.
Certainly, and that's another thing you need to look at, because there's plenty of hypocrisy even in these DAOs, where these decentralized autonomous organizations are claiming to be decentralized and autonomous, and then they go and they try and create regulations and try to somehow prove that they are the people who should have the say.
And what happens when someone fraudulent tries to create a decentralized, autonomous organization, right? Like, there's tons of different things that can happen. One of the other things that is an issue is that these smart contracts, at least in the current form of blockchain, can be not necessarily forged. You can't really forge them, but you can fake the truth on them in a way that allows them to kind of circumvent this, ultimate truth on the blockchain. And these are some of the exploits that people have found in just the basic technology that makes up this whole blockchain. And like you said, Web 3.0, very, 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 conceptual idea. When you say Web 3.0, it's extremely hard, like you said, to put a definition on it. It's so conceptual, but everything that we've been talking about might seem like individual topics that lead up to this. All of these things sit under the umbrella of Web 3.0. Imagine Web 3.0 as just the overarching, word to describe all of these different functionalities of blockchain, because Web 3.0 is built on blockchain.
Right. Yeah. I mean, it's just kind of the evolution of the internet past its current stage. Right. And I think kind of probably the biggest concern a lot of people have with, decentralizing things as Web 3.0 kind of proposes is just the fact that, while there's certainly many negatives to be taken from corporate regulation, government regulation, all of these things, there are, some positives. And, when you look at, if you use the example of like an online media service, there's plenty of blockchain-based media sharing services that have emerged. And take like a YouTube, for example, where YouTube has content moderation, where they're going to try to get rid of like illegal, extremely hateful stuff, right? And that's a good thing. Like, that is a valuable regulation that they carry out. Similarly to a social media site like Instagram, where you're going to not publicize these type of images. When you're taking away the central authority and making it decentralized, you don't have the ability to do that. Your power is only held within the shareholders, and it's not shareholders within the traditional context. It's people who have used the blockchain with this proof of work and have received the quote unquote token. It's a cryptocurrency token in the sphere of finance. But when it comes to other blockchain technologies, it's just a proof of work, concept. And so, it's these people, the shareholders with the most proof of work, essentially, that are going to have the say. And, there's plenty of problems that can arise from that.
One of the analogies that I heard that was really great to explain this kind of regulation concept is, and this is going to happen even with Bitcoin, even with the blockchain, and it already is happening, because there is SEC regulation and there's stuff like that that's already happening, slowly, mind you, but it's happening and it will continue to happen. But one of the analogy that I've heard is that, imagine you're essentially, in a developed town in the 1800s, okay? Or not in the 1800s. You're in a developed town now. Sorry, I'll explain this correctly. You're in a developed town now, and you want to go and get a value for something you want to sell. You go to a pawn shop that you sell it to, and then they go and sell it to someone else, right? They're going to make money as a middleman, and essentially it takes the direct trade from one person to another out of it. Now imagine you're back in the wild, wild west, right? Like, and sorry, with this old style, with the pawn shop, there's regulation, right? There's someone going to take it for a price, at this price, because it's valued at that price, and nothing bad's going to happen. Nothing bad is going to happen. No one's going to, have any fraudulent issues, because it's going from one hand to another hand to another hand. Now, if we're in the wild, wild west, imagine that we have like a trading post, right? And you're one person, Jack, and I'm another person. And I say, I want to barter and trade for this, whatever it may be, this, I don't care what it may be. I want this for this value. You and me barter, we get into an argument and we end up killing each other, right? Because it's the wild, wild west. Mm-hmm. That's essentially an analogy for, oh shit, the money's gone because, there was an issue with the way that this blockchain technology works. And eventually what the analogy ends up getting to is that eventually what happens to stop this is a sheriff ends up coming into town and saying, hey, you can't kill each other, but you can still, exchange with each other directly. And eventually that's what blockchain technology is going to try to get to a point where, it's safe, it's reliable, and it's truthful, but it's not, but it's not, encroaching on your privacy. It's not encroaching on your safety and so on and so forth. It's not encroaching on these fundamental ideas that blockchain was built upon.
Right. Yeah, I mean, the technology is going to continue to expand and evolve, and it's going to limit test until it reaches a point where, the decentralized nature is, too decentralized, and it's then going to need to be reined into hopefully a condition where it's, a net positive, let's say, for everyone using it.
So a little bit ago, I hinted about this idea of real ID. And real ID is extraordinarily important in the long run of blockchain technology. And this is where the real meat and potatoes, for lack of better words, about this technology comes to. Because essentially, like we talked about in the Twitter episode, like we talked about in other social media stuff, if you're responsible for what you do on the internet, your choices are going to be a lot different than if you're not responsible for what you do on the internet and you can say whatever you want.
Right.
And where this technology lies is in this decentralized chain of computers that are constantly validating each other, right? So your ID, whether it be a long string hash of, letters, numbers, alpha, this ridiculous, identifier that identifies me, Matthew Nelson, with my government ID, as who I am, or whether, I don't know exactly how we go about this because blockchain kind of eliminates this idea of government IDs, but it somehow you're verified as you and only you. And you're given an ID, and essentially you take this ID with you from Facebook, you take the same ID with you to Instagram, you take the same ID with you to, CapitalOne.com, you take the same ID with you to, BestBuy.com. You are this person everywhere, and you are not just this massive amalgamation of, random email accounts that don't technically really lead back to you. And of course, you could say there's like this kind of concept of IP tracking back to a home, but like what it is it gets rid of all this, insecure technology that doesn't verify you are who you say you are on the internet. And why it's important is that, sure, you might think, oh God, this is Big Brother watching over us, right? Oh no, someone's going to have access to all of this information and exploit all of this information, right? But I think the concept in its grander scale is that if everything is on the internet, if every last interaction you make is public, then there's nothing really private anymore. And that's kind of part of the scary part about this. But it also, while it might seem really terrifying, there are tons and tons of massive benefits to this type of, technology. You will just have to, sign in with your decentralized ID, and you have access to all of your crypto wallets. You have access to all of your money, whether it be in, US dollars or whatever it is, eventually transitioning out of, US currency into just crypto, because that's where the future of this whole technology goes to. And if we extrapolate this out far enough, it goes into a really dystopian type idea. But if we're talking about it relatively,
Yeah. In terms of the near future, like I think a lot of these things are kind of closer than people might believe. And yes, I agree. It's kind of scary to think about, all of this being accounted for on the internet. But I mean, at this point in time, anyone who's on the internet an extensive amount, you have no privacy.
No, not at all.
So unless, you have a reason for, extreme. Now, I'm a proponent of, internet privacy and data security. Absolutely. And like all of that. And like, yes, use your VPN, don't be dumb, practice, safe,
internet. Yeah. Safe internet usage.
Yeah, exactly. You could still be dumb. It's not just go throw out everything out and see what happens.
You still can be smart about it. Yes.
Correct. Yes, but there will be problems with the development of this technology, as with anything, and so all that I'm saying is, in its ideal circumstance, which it won't be. So like, what's the point of me saying this, right? But in its ideal circumstance, using blockchain technology in terms of creating these individual IDs that make everyone accountable for what they do on the internet and verify you as the singular entity that you are across the internet. I think there's a lot of value there in protecting against fraud and like identity theft even, and like
totally,
just all certainly transactional stuff. We've already seen the value of it when it comes to that, but we're gonna have to see how it develops, because there's going to be exploitations of this power. The people in control of the technology, like, there's still a centralized sense to this until everyone or a vast majority of people are users of the blockchain and are members of these DAOs. Until that's the case, there will still be abuses of power from those who control the most proof of work, who have the most say on these individual blockchains. There's still a level of power, and that will be abused because it's human nature. And so it'll be interesting to see how it develops.
Yeah.
But in its ideal sense, with what, the goal of the technology is, to decentralize things and to, make each person individually autonomous, and, it's kind of a true democracy of sorts when it comes to the internet.
Yeah.
Like, that's where the value is, and that's where one would hope that it develops to.
Right, exactly. It kind of gets rid of these, autocratic entities that rule certain, jurisdictions. But the only way that this gets stronger, of course, the only way that the truthfulness and the, like you said, the ability of it to work to its full potential, the only way it gets stronger is, of course, as it gains more and more adoption. Because more and more proof of work diversified across more and more accounts, it's just more diversified, which means that there's less chances for those who have the large amounts of proof of work to, like you said, take advantage of it. But I think what it looks like, if we go back to it a little bit, what it looks like for you and me in the future is just that I have my name, I have my ID, I have my bank account tied to it, I have my Instagram account tied to it, I have my, my Facebook account, my YouTube account, my whatever account. They're all tied across into this universal ID that is me and only me. And I can go on to whatever website I want, whatever broker I want, whatever, online shopping I want. Click buy, and it transfers my, crypto, my dollars, my whatever, and it gives them that money. And it's just this seamless connection between you and the seller, or, the seller and the end user. And of course, it can be, extrapolated into hundreds of different industries.
Yeah, and I think we're a lot closer to that than a lot of people might think. So yeah,
absolutely. Early stage blockchain stuff is all around and everywhere. One of the it's funny. Before we wrap this out, video games and blockchain technology. How about that?
I'm excited
for a quick moment.
I'm excited. I mean, it'll be interesting to see. The video games are already a multi-billion-dollar industry.
Oh, absolutely.
I certainly play a fair share of video games myself. And I mean, it's a big thing for video games is going to be both, NFTs and the use of, these proof of work type things, because you can basically monetize a video game to you can monetize a video game to where, instead of proof of work, it's proof of play, or, play to earn is what they are, is like a P2E game. If you've heard of, what's the game? I'm going to blank on it. But essentially, there was a game where it's like you have, these Pokemon. It's basically like Pokemon, except it's NFTs, and you own, these NFTs that you purchased with cryptocurrency. It was a token for the game, and then you did work with these NFTs, and they gamified it. Even though it was like data crunching. Kind of, they gamified it to where you were like, exploring a dungeon or battling other people.
Absolutely.
And then, doing so would earn you that token, which could for a while be, exchanged net positively for, real world currency, because you could, exchange it on a crypto exchange platform. So I think there's certainly a lot of future with that. Those were super, super basic, games, and the technology was, certainly not as robust as you would like to see it. But I'm interested to see where that goes.
I think the future of it in video games are these essentially kind of concepts of private blockchains where they exist just in the video game. And like you said, doing a dungeon proof of work. Oh, it's going to turn into in-game currency that, you can't be hacked and can't be cheated. And, oh, hey, I'm going to go buy this item with it, right? Like that's the ultimate goal. It's essentially taking this massive DeFi concept and turning it into a video game where your currency is just based blockchain ways. But one of the really cool ways, before, I don't want to go too much longer, but before we go, one of the really cool things that you have to talk about when you talk about blockchain in video games is, if you've been on the internet at all and are remotely, on the, video game area of the internet, that a specific game is very famous and infamous for its skin trading, and that would be, of course, CS:GO. And I want to talk in slight detail about this. Just imagine your skins aren't just, a PNG. Imagine they're an NFT, and they can be proved, and there is no falsification or forging of them. And you trade with me, I trade with you. There's no, hacking, no falsification, no issues. Everyone goes along their way, gets what they want, and has paid the correct amount for it.
Yeah, that's the future of it.
It
that
really
will
is.
happen. Even if it won't, even if those play to earn games are a little, further out, and the game was Axie Infinity.
Okay.
Finally, I Googled it. I won't say I remembered it. I had to Google it, but that was the game, the play to earn model. That might be a little further out, but creating, these, skin exchanges where it's your,
that's like
in-game
here
cosmetics. That's happening soon, and especially on marketplaces, like you have the Steam marketplace for CS:GO.
Absolutely.
And there's others as well. But yeah, being able to verify each individual, asset, these skins on the
Against
blockchain,
the registry.
will prevent a lot of the fraud. There's a terrible amount of fraud and of exploitation when it comes to that. And like, people are like, these are video game skins. It's like, yes. And some of them are also like 50 grand. People trade these skins. There's some people who do it as, their primary income. There's, skins that are tens of thousands of dollars. And so it's, that is much sooner than we think. That's happening right now. And that I'm excited for.
Right.
And so we'll just have to see how it continues to develop.
Just imagine the days when, my Doppler Sapphire Karambit or my Fade Karambit on CS:GO is now a NFT. It's now an NFT.
Did you have to Google those names? You don't.
Maybe.
Yes.
I don't know. I don't know.
You don't play CS:GO.
Yes, I had to look them up.
Okay.
I don't play CS:GO, but I felt that it would be better. It'd be more impactful.
Yeah. We can appeal to the kids to be cool and relatable.
Exactly. I don't play CS:GO. Sorry, guys. I don't play CS:GO.
This guy.
But you could probably come up with some famous Valorant skins, though.
Yeah, but it's different. Valorant isn't based off of a marketplace like the Steam marketplace.
Right. You just buy them and you can't trade them.
Right. I would like for it to be. That's
hey,
the
man,
future of these games.
It's cool though. It really is cool though to think that we can, stockify these, certain skins in video game items, like you said, where people make their whole equity on them or their whole, their whole income from it. It's crazy. If you're like, in your 30s or 40s, like, who the hell would have ever thought that one day you'd be trading a PNG, a
Right.
code that does a flippy animation on a knife or a flippy animation on a gun in a game would end up being literally something that you can trade and follow like the stock market for money.
I mean, I
crazy.
have made money trading skins in Rocket League. And is it a lot of money? No, it's not. It's like $50. But like I invested like, a couple $100 and traded around, and it's just like, no, I'm not, I'm dropping out of school and I'm going to start trading skins on Rocket League because I made $50. Like, look, mom, but it's just, if
cool stuff.
This is the basic, this is the rudimentary beginnings. And, as the technology continues to develop, it's only going to expand.
Cool stuff. That's all it is. But
Certainly.
I think that about wraps it out for us.
Indubitably.
We really hope you enjoyed this one because I enjoyed recording it. But
yeah, no, it's fascinating stuff.
It's cool. And we'll probably follow up some of our. We'll talk about this, these ideas in other episodes because it extends to a lot of different things. But without, no more to go on today. Thank you for watching. You can find us in all of our normal places. We're on YouTube Shorts, we're on TikTok, we're on Instagram, so on and so forth. And we really, really, really greatly appreciate any support you give, whether it's comments, likes. I know it's thumbs up on YouTube now, but that kind of bothered me because I was trying to do the animation stuff, and not everything's a thumbs up versus a like. But regardless, any support that you give is greatly appreciated.
Of course.
And I think that's all we got for you. So
certainly.
Yeah. Peace.
So yeah.